Hey everyone, I'm Paul Muller, the host of the AI Forecast, a weekly podcast sponsored by the amazing folks at Cloudera, where we explore the past, present, and future of data and AI in the enterprise, along with leading companies and industry experts. Dr. Maya Dillon is an astrophysicist turned AI thought leader and CEO of Consultancy Sire, where she's on a mission to equip executives and enterprises with the strategies, the governance and execution frameworks to make AI work for them and their businesses. All topics, as you'll know if you've been listening to this podcast, near and dear to our hearts at the AI Forecast. So let's dive into it. Welcome to the podcast, Maya.
Thank you, Paul. I'm super excited. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for the time and the space. And I'm loving the energy already. So yeah, let's do this.
Well, likewise, I'm really excited to have you here for numerous reasons, not least of which is one of my favorite words, astrophysicist. So I cannot wait to talk about this stuff. But before we get into talking about AI and leadership, we do a little thing to limber up here at the AI Forecast podcast, a bit of a fast four, if you want to call it that. Are you ready to play the game?
Yeah, I am as ready as I'll ever be.
What would people who know you best say is your superpower?
Turning anything I have in my head, say dreams and visions, into reality. I say it like this because it scares a lot of people, because I walk into a room and I'm like, oh, I've had this idea and I know how to make it happen. And
You're that force of nature CEO. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so whether it's tattoos or building a space or AI firm, it will happen. So there you go.
Okay, all right. Topic for another podcast: CEO
Definitely.
tattoos. A CEO
Definitely.
tattoos. Excellent.
There
all
you
right,
go.
Moving swiftly along. Well, let's keep it family. The most impactful technology of all time, in your opinion?
Computers, the original force multiplier, I think. Without it, we wouldn't be able to create, store, access data, work the algorithms that create AI.
Thank you, Ada Lovelace and Alan Turing.
Indeed, that's it. Shout out to them for sure, because that was the original intelligence multiplier.
Kind of leaning into that, we all talk about AI and what it could do for other people's businesses. Purely on a personal note, what would you like to see AI do for you in your future?
Me personally, or for the planet?
Well, you can take both. I'll give you both. You're a wonderful guest.
I think if there was a way of automating and creating the perfect meals so I don't have to think about it, I had someone taking care of me for making sure I have. I'm finding my life filled with nutrition and energy and good vibes and a good meal. That would be really good.
Uh-huh.
And then on the other side of things, I think for the planet, it's not the sexiest of topics, but it's an absolute necessary one. It would be around, of all things, waste disposal. So cleaning up our oceans, land, and of course, the atmosphere and the space just above us, because we are, adding to that problem at an exponential rate, and finding solutions to that is going to require AI. And the sooner we deal with that, the better.
So to paraphrase, a planet scale Roomba.
Yeah. If we can just have that out by 5 o'clock, that'd be amazing.
Well, you did say you're a force of nature, so I expect to see it done. And last but not least, and this is a strange question, and the fact that it needs explanation bothers me because it's a little too cerebral, but working with younger people, we're going to talk about mentoring at the end of today's podcast, but working with younger people, one of the things I realized is I had this unconscious competence when dealing with data, and my personal competence was I triangulate really aggressively. I never take one data point at face value. I tend to get 2 or 3, call it cynicism, call it what you will. But as an executive, it always helped me because I would triangulate, and my data, the fidelity of my data I thought was just naturally better. It just turned out I was working behind the scenes to ensure I had higher quality information. Just curious, what are some of the best practices you've learned as someone who works with data all the time?
I think the major one, I could go through a whole list of them. The biggest one I would actually say is beyond things like testing and validating and iterating. You've got the scientific process there. I think the most important one is asking why we're doing what we're doing, because as you just talked about, you triangulate, right? You bring in and enrich all this data from all these different sources. And having had an academic and scientific background, we do an awful lot because we want to explore the world. We're curious about it. But in business, it has to mean something. We talk about a return on investment, right? So
Mm.
we talk about the value in what we're doing. And I think in terms of best practices and having managed and nurtured teams and delivered these solutions, it lies somewhere in the middle, right? The answer is asking why so that we learn something new, but also provide value. It sits somewhere in the middle.
I think it's great advice. Well, it probably gives us a really awesome segue to let's just talk a bit about your background, because it has been, well, it's an unusual one. I mean, astrophysicist turned CEO. Tell us about how you came to be where you are.
I laugh at this because it is quite eclectic. And when I was leaving school, it was like you had a very clear, you were advised to have a very clear path to where you wanted to go, right?
Mm.
You needed to show that on your CV. So I guess to say my career has been eclectic would be an understatement. So I began in astronomy and astrophysics because that was my first love. It's what I wanted to do as a child. And yeah, whilst I think I was about 3, 4 years old, I was into my mythology and stories, and someone told me stories about the moon, and I was absolutely hooked. And then it was at that time I wanted to be an astronaut, while everybody else wanted to be like a ballerina or a mermaid. I was like, I want to go to the moon. And yeah, so growing up, one of the things that happened, so I grew up in the northeast of England. We grew up in council estates. I think Americans call that social housing. I grew up below the poverty line. And when you grow up in that kind of environment, your ambitions become curbed quite quickly,
Mm.
to an extent, for me at least. So when I realized no one was going to send me to Space Camp or Star City, of course, astrophysics was the natural thing for me to plan towards doing. So
Yeah.
that's what I went and did. I stayed the course, and then when I got my PhD, by then you have a very clear idea of this is where my path is going to go. For the longest time, I was about 28, 29. We had the world economic recession at that time, the major one that made everybody pivot, and I was like, okay, who am I now? After wanting to be a physicist for so long, an astrophysicist for so long, and I went into coaching to find myself. And in that process, I kind of remembered how much I love dealing with the complexity of human decision making, like getting to know people, understanding what drives them, their values. And I'm actually a naturally deep empath. I feel other people's emotions. It's a rarity, I know, in the sciences, but I've been built like that.
Yeah, it's
And
normally it's how do you identify the extroverted scientist? They're the one looking at the other person's shoes.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Like, where are they from and how did you get here? So
Yeah,
yeah, all of
yeah,
that.
yeah,
For sure, for sure.
yeah.
And yeah, I naturally took to it, and before I know it, I was coaching execs on their leadership. And then the world changed again. I was at it
Mm.
for about 3 years, and then the era, and this is how I came to where I am right now. The era of big data arrived, right? The whole
Mm.
banners of like data being the new oil and all of it. And it arrived at a time where I was already thinking, well, it was fulfilling work, working with people, but I missed doing something tangible. We talked about testing and validating and
Mm.
iterating, right? I missed all of that, and data science and AI allowed me to do that. And before I know it, I'm not only combining all the skills I learned as a researcher, understanding industries. I'm now using my statistical analysis. I'm using my coding again. I'm now also understanding people, what motivates them, because AI is also has a huge human aspect to it. It's not just all code and data and algorithms, right?
Mm.
It was bringing all of that together. It was a fusion of all of that. And as I'm here now, I think one of the things that's happened, and I want to say it's a mixture of fortune and preparedness and just the natural direction things have taken in my own drive, but it feels like I've gotten here at the right time, and I'm ready and the person I need to be for what AI demands of all of
Mm.
us in this world right now. So looking back, joining the dots and being here at this moment, it feels like everything was almost like meant to be. Do if you believe in that kind of thing.
Yeah, no,
So
quite.
yeah,
Well, what's the old saying? Is luck is when uh, preparation meets circumstance, right? So
Yeah, preparation opportunity equals success or
there
something
you
like
go.
that. Yeah, there
So,
you go.
question without notice. I can
Hmm.
just see the poster with some people rowing in it or something like that. One of those motivational posters. No, but seriously, question without notice though. What can astrophysics teach us about business, and what has business taught you as an astrophysicist? I mean, I'm just curious about the juxtaposition.
I think it's so you and I had a chat prior to this recording the podcast, right? And we were talking about weak signals and patterns. And I think with astrophysics, certainly there is a lot of work that is about looking through huge, vast data sets and figuring out, you always begin with a question anyway in the sciences. So we look at vast data sets, and you're already going in with a question of, I need to look at a particular, I'm searching for a particular signal. But one of the things you always make sure you don't do is, if you start seeing patterns somewhere, you don't ignore them. You you dive into them just a little bit. Is this noise? Is this a pattern? Is this something that I should be
Mm.
paying attention to? Is this something I put away? And that kind of discipline that kind of gets ingrained in you is absolutely invaluable for business. Pattern recognition, fundamentally, that's where it's all at. And in business, the only way you succeed is actually building on the progress and the successes of what you've had previously. Knowing it becomes intuitive, knowing what works and what doesn't, and being able to stick by it as well is super important. And I think in terms of what business can teach astrophysics is, in astrophysics, things are moved by grants. And, there you go.
Money.
I'm moving already into a
Yeah.
contentious area that's going to make a lot of people go, oh my God, here we go. But
But you're
the
right.
fundamental thing is that those grants are still awarded to those researchers who provide value, not just indulge in curiosity. And I think that's what business teaches astrophysics and science. So what have you done with the resources and the funding that you have that shows that we've taken that step forward into the next thing? Because those are the grants that are actually successful too. So that's the back and forth.
I love it. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. We're going to talk about AI. Obviously, it's I guess the raison d'etre for the podcast, and specifically talk about AI and leadership. And as I was preparing for today, I thought to myself, I'm going to ask you what might seem like a strange question, but what does AI mean to you? Because as I'm working with a number of other clients elsewhere in the industry at the moment, and one of the things I find that is happening, it's almost like the Tower of Babel situation. People will be talking to each other about AI, a group of people. And it turns out when you listen a little bit longer, they're all talking about different elements, a bit like the parable of the blind men and the elephant. They're all talking about different elements, or some different elements of the same thing, or they're using the same word to describe something. I won't say it's completely different, but the use cases, the intentions, and therefore the consequences are not remotely related. The governance requirements. So I'm just curious, what does AI mean to you?
Fundamentally, I would say, in all of those scenarios you've described, everyone's trying to solve a problem.
You're
Everyone's
right.
trying to solve a problem much more efficiently, or with greater insight, or with greater impact, or just something that gives them an edge. Maybe they're even doing it for the sheer fun of it. I think AI for me means co-creation. So a little bit more about me. We talked about my scientific background and then going into business. I'm a huge creative. Things that aren't on my CV, I paint, I write, I play music. And for me, when I'm using AI, I'm not just doing it for, say, maybe I'm writing up a blog piece. Can you help me with the flow of something? I want it to be something that enhances my voice. And it's the same with anything else that I create. I bring in AI and I utilize it when I'm searching for ideas or leveling up what I already have. And in that process, it is co-creation. That's what that means. It's enhancing what's already there. So I know we've heard the old adage that AI is supposed to augment human intellect. That's what it's here for. It's to bring out the best aspect of us and help us level up. So I would say I would go back to that co-creation.
I love it. As Steve Jobs once said about the computer, the bicycle for the mind.
Oh, that's emotive.
Isn't it just? Steve was the planet misses him. He was an iconoclast.
He was, yeah.
So you remarked, and you make this point on your website, and I've watched a couple of talks and read some of your blog posts. You talk about the idea that the winners in AI won't be the ones who have the best tech, but are the ones with the best leadership? Unpack that for me. Because it
Okay.
does seem to be very tech focused at the moment. Who's got first mover advantage? Who's got the right algorithms? We obviously, China's just literally blown the doors off everyone in the last couple of weeks with their advancements. It gets all the headlines. What do you mean by the best leadership?
So the best leadership is when you look at AI, again, we talked about co-creation. It's leading with humans first. It's being human centric. And yes, everyone is fascinated and taken by the next algorithm, the next fancy piece of technology that's going to apparently paradigm shift us into a new era of the singularity, all of that jazz. But fundamentally, AI first leadership, if I may actually steep it in reality,
Yeah.
is seeing AI not just as a tech stack. It's actually looking at it in terms of strategy. So when businesses are employing AI, the ones who actually lead well with it are the ones who actually think about the holistic impact of AI. So normally what tends to happen is people think, okay, let's put this in a box. Let's put AI in a box of IT and R&D. And then they wonder why the transformation isn't happening. Why aren't they the disruptors? The reason for that is when you are actually starting to develop and implement AI projects, you're already changing and challenging the status quo. Developing and building AI asks you or demands of you to ask particular questions. What is it that I'm trying to solve? What problem am I trying to solve? How am I trying to solve it? Who am I serving? How is this going to be deployed? And what impact will it actually have? Those aren't just technical questions, they involve all aspects of the business. And unless you lead with that in mind, with that holistic view, you are going to constantly find yourself moving from POC to POC. You're going to be at the mercy of the next latest technology you wish you had. And is it worth it? And everyone seems to be running ahead and you're falling behind. It's not the fact that they've got the fastest or the fanciest algorithm. It's because they are actually seeing the world exactly the way I've just described, which is, okay, I'm creating a solution with the view in mind that whoever deploys it is going to be achieving X, Y, Z. You need to take in that mindset as well.
Intuitively, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I suppose my question is, have you observed this empirically, or is this your concern for how businesses might adopt it?
I would say empirically, and my concern, I've seen where it has worked spectacularly well, where businesses have actually thought, okay, we're creating something that is initially a POC that could be an asset for the organization, that now we could roll out as a capability and maybe a product. And that is a beautiful thing to actually behold. And then I've seen opportunities where, situations where people have poured an awful lot of money into it and then they've signed it off and didn't want to hear of it again because it was just too either complicated or they couldn't explain the value of it. And then I've seen bits and pieces as well with not just clients but competitors as well, where you just roll out and see what will happen. And that is actually the worst part of all of those worlds, because you are actually creating harm in some of those scenarios and worst case ones.
All right, well, let's talk to that, because I guess there is this. I was having a conversation literally last week, and somebody said to me, I think you said it politely, but they were a bit more forceful. They basically said, look, this AI stuff's all a bit of BS, because there's really nothing new here in terms of what it means to business. People are any more than if you were living, a couple of centuries ago and they introduced the Jacquard loom to make cloth, and the weavers and the Luddites, rioted over the fact that what was previously artisanal work was now being done by a machine. It's challenging people's jobs. It'll need, governance. It'll need change management, but none of that's necessarily new. And I said, look, I think I can agree with most of that. I said in my sense of it is, what's new to me is the breadth and depth. It's one of the few technology disruptions I've seen that both cuts from the highest level. I mean, even board members should be concerned about the futures of their jobs, because,
Definitely.
an AI can probably read a lot of the reports and ask the CEO the same questions that a board member could. Probably do a better job of it, truth be known. Don't fire me, board members who I'm working for at the moment. But right down to obviously an individual contributor, and horizontally, HR, legal, R&D, everyone's impacted. The second is the speed. And I wanted to bring this up excuse the long lead up for this question, but the speed element of it seems to be the other thing that is different. And I know we talk about time compression of technology evolution a lot, but this one is breathtaking for me personally. And I get the sense that at the board level, there's this sense that they need to hurry up and do something. Back to the point you were just making about the worst thing they could do. There is this enormous pressure that, hey, if we don't start doing something, our competition will. And so let's just get going with something and clean up the mess later. So tell me why that's such, because intuitively that seems like not a bad idea. Like, it's better than waiting, right? At least we're learning. So tell me why that's such a terrible idea.
So presupposing it's a terrible idea.
Okay, yes, all right.
So no, I would actually say in some cases, if you're not working in regulated sectors, I'm working backwards from the answer that I've already got in my mind.
Please.
And you're not directly if you were in an R&D and closed environment where you're playing, by all means try lots of different things. If it's not actually impacting an end user, that's why sandboxes exist, right?
Yeah.
You play around with stuff. By all means play and learn, but an awful lot of these solutions are actually deployed with the client or the customer in mind already and laid out into the real world, where the impact of them is very, very real. So one of the things I did want to touch upon, you were talking about the height and the depth and the breadth and the speed. You talked about the loom, and in my mind it brought me to the memory of the printing press.
Yes.
All of that, the loom and the printing press changed the world because of scale as well. And that is also what's happening.
Yeah.
So AI is now prolific and endemic. It's in everything. So the reason, going through what you were saying, it's a bad idea, is because of the real world impact these solutions actually have on people, not just on businesses. And if I was to talk about, we could talk till the cows come home about all the different examples of where it's gone wrong, the lives it's affected, the reputations it's damaged. The reason it's also a bad idea, even if you are just seeing it from a company perspective, is the impact it has on your reputation. Trust is something, I think there's an old saying, right? I'm trying to remember the business thought leader that said this, but it took him 20 years to build a reputation and 2 minutes to have it destroyed. And that kind of thing does not come back. And once the reputation is damaged, the value in the intangibles is priceless. So one of the things I would say is, you have this side of things where, like, okay, am I serving our clients appropriately? Am I giving them what they want and need? Am I doing it the right way? And this is where we start talking about governance and ethics and things like that. But also the cost of doing it wrong is much more than just, say, even if you didn't, you weren't concerned about the real world impact. It has a financial impact. We now have laws and regulations and legislation that will actually hold you accountable. And having those things in mind now, governance is part of business for the development of AI. So doing it any other way is just fundamentally a bad idea.
To your point, the social license to operate is easily lost. And as you say, very, very difficult to regain. So let's just say I am one of those board members who's feeling like I've got to go and hurry up and, what do they say? Hurry up and wait. But I'm doing the opposite. I'm hurrying up and doing something. So fire, ready, aim. Sorry, that's the cliche.
Yes.
Fire, ready, aim. In your experience, engaging with businesses and boards, and you don't need to get specific about which ones, although I'd love you to, what are some of the biggest blind spots you find when you're talking to leaders that they've got when it comes to AI, and particularly with regards to strategy and governance? Because that's the boring bit for some people, isn't it?
We'd already touched on seeing AI just as purely a tech stack. I think the other challenge when it comes to governance is thinking that it is 10 times harder than it really is. Like, it's never happened before. We have governance in so many sectors. We have it in finance and healthcare, any industry, automotive, telecommunications. We have these governance processes internally with businesses. It's just now being applied to AI. It is about bringing these different frameworks together. Frameworks, by the way, which already exist, and yes, new ones are coming in, that we can use. And I think the blind spot is thinking, or rather volunteering to think, this is too complicated. We don't know how to deal with it. It will either A, resolve itself, or someone will make us solve it. There you go.
Yeah. A
Contentious.
lawsuit sharpens the mind, doesn't it?
Always,
Yeah.
right? But it's when we turn this into a psychological battle, we're making something that's already, yes, there are complications and difficulties in it. We have to make new frameworks, which are always clunky initially. But by, like, as I said, coming back, if we put that psychological hurdle in front of us, we stop ourselves from doing things that are actually much more simple in practice.
Hmm.
Like I say, clunky, a little bit messy, but then you build and reiterate, and it's the same as it's been done in other industries. This is not new. It's just applied to AI.
It's interesting. I was speaking to somebody literally again last week, and they said their AI governance policy is 2 typewritten pages. It's not, and I was a little shocked. I was expecting it to be like 40 and full of legalese. And like, no, it's 2 pages of relatively speaking common sense, just some simple do's and don'ts. And
Yeah.
they'll elaborate on it obviously over time, but right now it's just enough to have. It doesn't need to be overly complex, I guess, is the key message.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. What I would say, as long as there is something linking and bridging the two. So, from the fundamental development of the AI itself, for the DevOps, MLOps perspectives, being very clear on what you're actually creating, tying that with the value that the solution has for the business, and the stakeholders, the senior stakeholders, having clarity on why this is being done. A 2-pager linking those 2 areas is actually probably enough for that organization, at least. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next topic, and it's related, and it's this notion of ethical AI or responsible AI. We've talked about it on the podcast a couple of times. We've had Cal Al-Dubayb on a couple of weeks ago, amongst others. It's a topic that I see responsible AI and ethical AI. There's books on it. There seems to be this bubbling undercurrent talking about ethical AI. But how do you operationalize something as well? Because I guess ethics is, I won't say nebulous, but it starts to move from objective to subjective in some places, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think if you start thinking about it in terms of morals and ethics, yeah, it becomes objective and subject. What will work in one sovereign domain won't work in another. What we find appealing in one direction will not be in another. I think when we are talking about the tangibles, moving it from being something nebulous, if we create the ethics frameworks, so I've created a couple in the past myself for organizations. There are other aspects beyond the moral implications. There are the tangibles of things like security, privacy, technical robustness. You put those in, those are measurable, tangible things that you implement in your solution, right? If you are thinking in those terms, you then have something that's also explainable, it's also transparent, then you can explain the why of it. You can then develop trust and you can decide, is this something that we want to do? Is this something of value? And and if it goes wrong, can we ensure that the accountability is there? Those processes provide accountability, and that's what we're focusing on at the end of it, right? Things. So I cut my teeth in cybersecurity, and the principles there, or the philosophy there was, it's not if, it's when. So, and then how do you recover from that? If you are able to explain your pathway from why you did what you did, how you did it, and then what it looks like for your client, end user, whoever is in the receipt of that solution, and when it goes wrong, you are able to explain and say, we hold our hands up, we didn't see that bit, or this is how it works, this is how we take responsibility. I think that's much more the important aspect of it. To hold the developers and the curators of AI solution accountable is what I think society in whole is actually looking for.
I mean, I've got so many questions about this. We might have to get you back on to talk about how you operationalize that, at a board level, because, at a board level, I don't have the time to go and sit with the developer and ask them, hey, what are your secure coding practices, and tell me about the data that you use to train this model. I've got to have a set of dashboards at a board level where I'm questioning the CEO and their team. I'm curious as to how we operationalize that, but that might be a deeper discussion for another day.
Oh, definitely. And I would even start it a little bit on it, and it's the abstraction of the metrics. So you take those deeper numbers and you pull them together and say the implication of these following metrics leads to this level of scoring, whether or not it's in risk or whether or not it's in governance parameters that you actually have. That way you make it much more transparent. You have to level those detailed insights up, essentially.
Got it. All right.
Yeah, that's the start of it, and we can talk about that another time. Yeah.
I'd love to. If you'd come back, it'd be super. This is just a wonderfully stimulating conversation for me. Hopefully, the audience is enjoying it as much as I am. I want to move on to another topic, and it's related to ethics, because I think some of this talks to fidelity and this notion of bias. And I'm gonna conflate bias and hallucination, because while they're not the same thing, I would argue that some of it comes from the same root cause of dirty data, or a lack of good governance around the data that's feeding models. And if you want to disagree, I'd be more than happy to listen to your point of view on it. It does seem to be a persistent challenge. I guess, what do you do about this? What can be done about it, if anything?
What can be done about it? We've already had the capacity to do something about it. We just haven't been doing it. And I'm going to be very overt about this. The data that's used to create any or train any algorithm, inherently, whichever industry you go into, and I've built these things myself, is going to be dirty. It's going to be incomplete. And in a lot of cases, in a world where people are rushing to the end line, it's going to also be non-compliant. The bias isn't just in the data. It's not just in the algorithm. Human beings deploy these things. We get to train, test, and check these things. And an awful lot of what I've seen in the past, the history that we actually have where AI has gone wrong, all of these things could have been stopped by just one person in the pipeline saying, should we do this? And saying, actually, bringing together the engineers and saying, okay, how complete is this data? You do realize the model is going to be biased, right? What will the outcome look like? Will it be harmful? If it is, then let's do something about it. That's the conversation that should have happened. And if that was to happen, an awful lot of these scenarios would have been massively avoided. And it comes back to us. It comes back to our agency. AI isn't happening by itself and running away from us. We are the ones who still press the damn button.
You make a
We are
good point.
responsible. We are responsible for it. It's not AI has to be responsible for itself. We are responsible for AI. And the beauty of that is it means that we have control over how it's developed and deployed then. It's up to us, essentially.
All right, but let me challenge you on one thing, because I think if I read another headline with the word agentic in it, I will lose my mind. But I guess that is the Terminator scenario, right? That is the singularity,
Yeah.
at least Singularity 1.0, is the idea of AIs feeding AIs. I'll call it dirty data. I'll call it biased data. Call it, whatever you want. Biased data, dirty data is fed in. A hallucination starts. A hallucination is shared with another agent that takes that hallucination, and before too long, it metastasizes. It's automated inflation of whatever problem, metastasizing we're talking nanosecond speeds, with feedback loops, unintended consequences. It kind of makes me want to curl up in a ball when I think about it too hard sometimes. Calm me down, or maybe give me reason to be fearful. Either, you know what I mean? Either tell me, you know what, Paul, you're absolutely correct. You should be worried, and there's things you should do about it. But yeah, I mean, should I be worried? Should boards be worried? Because it strikes me that this could go wrong very quickly if we're not disciplined.
It will go wrong at some point because of just the volume and the scale that it's actually being done. Again, the solution to that is not to let everything run by itself. That we're again putting this agenda of efficiency over efficacy over accountability. And it's all fine and well if you're messing around with different types of agents so you can get a better calendar schedule, make appointments and flights and scrape the web just for yourself. That's a different story altogether. You scale that out to, I don't know, being dramatic, how you run a hospital. I wouldn't advise. We come back to human in, on, and around the loop. We have to have it. And I know we love this notion of AI running other AIs, but until we actually have clarity on how these connections work, until we actually have a way of measuring, like you said, you used a very emotive word, the metastasized aspect of this, right? You are going to get those runaway situations. And this is, again, the situation where the technology moves faster than our capacity to figure out how do we deal with it? And it forces us to slow down and figure out, okay, how do we deal with this as we're moving along? And we, again, that is back in our charge. But yes, you are going to get those individuals and those organizations who are going to be like, look at the latest amazing thing I've created. And there are going to be others who are like, I'm being brutally pragmatic here. The engineer, the CEO in me, and the scientist in me sees it all happening. We are going to be taken by the latest capabilities, but we do still have the capacity to learn from those mistakes if and when they come, and feed those systems and learnings back into the new generation of systems that we create.
A thought just occurred to me as well. As a manager of people, and I've seen
Mm.
every manner of stupid you can possibly imagine. Although some of my staff seem to have it as one of their KPIs to come up with new ones. The point being management, and people, the ultimate AI agents. We don't let them run loose and do whatever it is they want. We have laws, we have governance, we have management meetings, we have KPIs, we check in on them, we have authorization processes. And I suppose what we're saying here is the same applies in the world of automation, if not more so. And there's nothing, at the risk of repeating something I said earlier, there's nothing new under the sun. We've just got to make sure we don't forget that this stuff isn't infallible any more than anyone else is infallible. Thoughts?
And that's the whole point. It's not infallible, and we do have the power of agency ourselves. We can do that. We've done it before in other technologies. It is moving quickly, but again, we are empowered and are more than capable of solving our problems, the ones that we create. And it's a matter of doing this right. When I talk about responsible AI, we're talking about doing this right. It comes back to the scientist in me when we talk about repeatability and reproducibility. We have these frameworks where when we're engineering and designing something, does this work each time? What is the outcome? And then can somebody else recreate this? And through those processes, it has its natural inherent checks and balances. And it's something that you can measure and quantify and validate before you move on and say, okay, let's run with this, right? These systems and frameworks already exist. Just take a pause and use them, because one of the things that comes out of all of this governance stuff is, and we talked about this psychological blocker, is this belief that governance and regulations actually blocks innovation. It doesn't. By creating these stringent frameworks, and as I was saying, test, validate, iterate, you actually create an opportunity for you to measure and quantify your failures and your successes, and that allows you to actually speed up your development in the appropriate way. You get to see where all those holes are, the failures are, and where the successes are. You then get to explain and make up for those shortfalls should they exist, or leverage the successes and the wins. You get to then bring people along for the journey. You then get to build trust, and you then get to build something that's super resilient and actually serves the people it was meant to serve. So we have all of that capability within us. It's somehow that everyone suddenly gets very blurry because it's AI.
Absolutely. I mean, inspirational and I think beautifully pragmatic all at the same time. I've got one final question for you, technically two. I know that you are an advocate of great mentoring and mentorship. What's your advice to would-be mentors and to hopeful mentees?
So I've been a mentor and I've been a mentee. And so, like with everything I've just talked about, steeped in brutal pragmatism, I would say when someone comes to you for mentorship, you've got to remember one thing: their success is not a threat to you. We've been brought into this world where we believe that success is somehow a zero-sum game. And there's the old adage, the candle does not diminish by lighting something else. The truth is your success is actually enhanced by theirs. And if we buy into the scarcity mindset of, oh no, if I help this other individual, they're going to be taking my job or they're going to take my opportunities, then we just buy into the scarcity mindset. We perpetuate this whole thing, this mythology, and we hold all ourselves back. So my thing would be that when you were building in the dark and you were alone and you were thinking, no one else is seeing this, people see it because they see the result of your successes. They want to emulate that. That is testament to who you've become. So share that. learn, teach, and learn from them too as well. And let's see if we can just rise together in all of this.
The candle does not diminish by lighting another candle. What a wonderful way to look at it. Maya, it's been an absolute thrill having you on. A wonderfully stimulating conversation. You've given me a lot to think about, hopefully our audience as well. If people are interested in learning more, where can they go?
If they want to learn more, especially about what SIRE does as well, because we stand for doing AI the right way. We talk about transparency. We talk about integrity. That is the big thing as well. To check out SIRE.ai, so that XSAIA.ai. And I am building up that website as well. So you'll start seeing links there with all my podcasts and the different blogs and things that I've written. But what I'd also say as well, and this is, it's an amazing opportunity to plug what I do as a business, but go out and learn and look at other news outlets as well, right? In the world where we love to have our thoughts and ideas echoed back to us, we're moving into something that's dangerous territory. Listen to the other side. Read things you wouldn't normally read. Find outlets that make your blood boil, and then you think, why do they think like that, right? And learn from it. So the internet is at your disposal. So whether or not you go to SIRE, read something new, look at something else, have something that inflames those passions and then gets you thinking, okay, so what if and why? All of those things. So go out there, learn. The world is at your fingertips.
Can I get an amen? I love it. All right. Well, folks, that is a wrap. Maya, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again for tuning in. I don't know why I say tuning. None of you use radios. I'm old. Forgive me. That's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.